On drug trafficking getting even larger in scale, the president declaring cartels as unlawful combatants, paving the way.
You dare believe that a federal judge in America, the one who once wore the black robe and placed her hand on the Constitution, swearing to protect justice, was actually the mastermind behind a network smuggling more than 240 kilograms of drugs, laundering nearly $180 million, and secretly bringing hundreds of armed criminals into Minnesota. Leila Mahad, 49 years old, was neither coerced nor blackmailed. She personally engineered the entire system using signatures instead of bullets, turning her courtroom into gang headquarters. In a single morning, hundreds of agents simultaneously raided 27 locations, and what they uncovered sent chills across the entire United States. Are you ready to stare into the darkness? Watch now. The war on illicit drug smuggling under President Trump is escalating dramatically in both scale and severity. The president has declared the cartels to be unlawful combatants, paving the way for the application of wartime powers to eradicate them completely. At 5:18 in the morning in the city of Minneapolis, state of Minnesota, a tense atmosphere enveloped everything. A federal raid unfolded in pitch darkness. A judge was placed under secret surveillance by authorities. Encrypted routes and shipments linked to the CJNG cartel had been uncovered. This is regarded as the most serious security breach in the history of the state of Minnesota to date. 6 kilograms of cocaine were discovered right inside the private office of the female judge appointed to uphold the law in Minnesota. This was not some ordinary cartel stash house. This was the very seat of justice itself turned into a narcotics distribution hub. This is not a threat coming from beyond the border. This is betrayal wears the solemn robe of the judiciary. At 5:18 in the morning, Minneapolis lay shrouded in eerie silence and bone-chilling cold. Frost coated every car window and nothing on the streets gave the slightest hint of the trouble about to descend. Yet a federal raid had already begun in complete silence. Unmarked black vehicles glided to a stop outside the chambers of Judge Leila Mahad. Doors opened, the sharp click of boots echoed crisply on the pavement, and FBI and DEA agents moved in without a sound. A specialized breaching tool slammed into the reinforced door and shattered it in one violent blow. The entire building shuddered. Family photographs sitting beside the American flag swayed violently, a haunting reminder of the oath once solemnly sworn but now utterly shattered. Agents swept through every room with surgical precision. Drawers were yanked out and emptied flashlight beams slicing through the suffocating darkness. Behind a cleverly concealed false wall, they uncovered 6 kilograms of cocaine, tightly wrapped, and 7 firearms nestled in protective foam cases. Then came the biggest shock for the investigation team. A dust-covered hidden safe was forced open, revealing $81 million in meticulously sealed cash. On the desk, an unlocked phone blinked incessantly with encrypted messages detailing routes, dates, and cargo codes directly tied to CJNG shipments. This is betrayal built right into the heart of the justice system. Leila Mahad, 49 years old. Somali-born, was neither coerced nor blackmailed. She personally designed it, held the door open, and chose to betray the country that handed her power. For 6 years, she ran a sophisticated criminal network, more than $61 million in cash and $118 million in suspicious wire transfers flowing through 29 shell companies registered in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Panama, and Curacao. Every single company was fictitious, existing only on paper with the stamp and signature of a judge who once swore to defend American justice. None of those companies sold a single real product, had a phone number, or employed a single soul, yet they laundered more money than most legitimate banks. All of it flowing from CJNG trafficking routes. The participants were not street-level soldiers, but hand-picked insiders, bank executives approving midnight wire transfers, a police chief signing special customs clearances, and beneath those approving nods, the trucks rolled through untouched, The product cleared and the money flowed back into private pockets. This was no longer petty bribery. This was deliberately engineered architecture. At 2:17 in the morning, security cameras captured Judge Leila Mahad slipping into a pitch-black community center through a side door, no lights, no security, 3 men following close behind her. One of the men trailing her was later identified as Abdi Khalaf, 36 years old, wanted in 2 states for armed robbery. They stayed inside for only 17 minutes. No conversation, no bags, just the soft creak of a door opening and closing and the lingering scent of a deal struck in the dark. But the most horrifying discovery was this: Leila Mahad was not merely trafficking drugs, she was importing criminals. More than 580 young Somali men with prior convictions, gang tattoos, and bullet scars were funneled into Minnesota through her own pipeline. In 16 months, they carried out 57 shootings, 91 armed robberies, 9 overdose deaths, and 22 forced prostitution cases, every single crime tracing back to the same batch of human resources personally shielded by the judge. The shootout outside the Bloomington supermarket that left 2 elderly citizens gravely wounded was carried out by a gunman carrying a PCA card from a clinic that had already defrauded Medicaid of $1.7 million in ghost services. Money meant for caring for elderly Americans had been turned into bullets. The line between law enforcement and criminal enterprise was no longer blurred. It had been completely erased by the very judge entrusted to protect it. Leila Mahad did not merely break the law, she architected an entire protection racket for crime. If that makes your blood run cold, you are not alone. By Thursday's dawn, the investigation was no longer quietly gathering dust in files and evidence lockers. It had grown legs, rolled out, put on uniforms, and was now armed with ice-cold execution orders. What began as a quiet search of a judge's office exploded into Operation North Blade, the federal all-out offensive to excise the corruption tumor that had metastasized across Minnesota. For weeks, the command center walls were plastered with red dots, green arrows, circles around warehouses, clinics, apartment blocks, garages, and 2 river docks. Ordinary buildings that Minnesotans drove past every day without a second glance. But behind those doors, an entire cartel economy ran like clockwork on signatures, permits, and lethal silence. At 4:03 in the morning, every phone lit up at once with 2 words: execute now. More than 100 federal and local units moved as one through the darkness. Black SUVs tore across icy roads, tactical trucks crouched behind apartment blocks. Patrol units sealed every freeway ramp. Bell helicopters thumped overhead above the Riverside warehouse's rotor wash, blasting clouds of powdery snow into the darkness. The first hammer blow fell on an abandoned truck yard in Brooklyn Park, a crumbling building with rust-eaten signs. But the moment agents breached the side door, they walked into humming industrial packagers, drums of cutting agents' pallets of sealed product ready for distribution. 2 runners tried to sprint through the racking, but K9 units cut them off at the emergency exit. On a metal table sat a shipping manifest marked medical supplies addressed to a clinic that did not exist. 20 miles to the south, another team smashed into the basement of a deconsecrated church. Stained glass windows glowed faintly as dawn crept in, but inside there were only plastic drums packed with narcotics vacuum sealers, money counters, and air thick with chemical fumes. Early arriving volunteers bringing coffee froze at the sight of federal rifles. Behind a false wall, investigators found traces of late-night handoffs documented in encrypted messages. The fiercest resistance erupted in Burnsville as the tactical team closed in 2 figures burst from a garage, sprinting across the snow-covered yard with plumes of white exploding beneath their boots. Can you believe the very representative of justice was hiding millions of dollars in firearms right inside her own chambers? They carried no flags, no gang colors, just the raw instinct to flee. One vaulted a fence and plunged into the trees, but a drone overhead painted a white cross on the running shadow. Agents tightened the noose, and minutes later he was face down on frozen grass wrists, cuffed breath steaming in the air. By noon, 27 locations had fallen. More than 200 kilograms of narcotics cash stuffed into air vents and under floorboards' laptops, packed with routing data appointment books overlapping with dates of meetings involving now-resigned officials, everything seized. Shock spread faster than the news from Duluth to Rochester. People stepped outside to find yellow tape across familiar streets, helicopters circling unmarked vans hauling away evidence. This was not an invasion from the outside, this was from inside the house. Operation North Blade was a corruption purge carried out in broad daylight. It has not ended the war, but it has sliced clean through the first layer of skin, exposing rot so deep it makes the bones ache. The raids did not stop at breach doors and helicopter rotors. They detonated outward into city halls, boardrooms, and neighborhoods that never imagined cartel tentacles could coil right up to their front porches. Inside the command center, the walls are now papered solid with seized photographs, recovered documents, bank transfers, notarized letters, municipal approvals, ghost equipment orders, every piece fitting together into a perfect machine that turned narcotics into cash, into influence and influence into an impenetrable shield. Each piece alone could be denied, but stitched together they formed an undeniable portrait. The smuggling did not slink through the shadows. It flowed through forms, stamps meeting minutes and signatures. The ledgers revealed regular payouts labeled facility fees or security consulting, $32,000 a month for nearly 2 years, straight into the Hennepin County Sheriff's personal account. Another $11,500 tied to a zoning decision that turned an abandoned warehouse into a community center, the same one later raided. Emails between Leila Mahad and the bank executive were short and ice-cold delete the transfers. No delays. Money moved in hours, not through dark alleys, but through pristine administrative channels. A police department received a massive grant right when traffic checkpoints along the transport corridor mysteriously vanished. A city council nodded through 6 warehouse leases in a 12-minute meeting, all to Somali-named shell companies with 0 employees. Inside government buildings, panic erupted, office doors locked, emails scrubbed, documents shredded. But the digital trails were already locked in federal hands. Analysts worked around the clock, turning names once printed on business cards into dense clusters of red dots across the investigation map. The public was not merely angry, they were shaken to the marrow. For years they had trusted the badge, the judicial robe, the banker's polite smile, only to discover those very people had been ushering narcotics straight into their neighborhoods. At the St. Paul Community Center, elderly residents stared at television screens showing their familiar streets cordoned off with police tape. One old woman whispered, "I walked past that church every day for 20 years and never knew." Outside, the county courthouse protests erupted, hand-scrawled signs thrust skyward. "If the law is the criminal, what justice is left? Who the hell have we been trusting?" A few officials rushed out to defend themselves, but no one wanted to listen anymore. They blamed federal overreach, called it misunderstanding, random coincidence, but the truth kept piling on heavier by the hour. Emails matching shipments, permits, matching payments, cases dismissed right on the cartel calendar. Corruption was not accidental, it was meticulously engineered. A police union rushed out a trembling statement that a few bad apples don't represent the whole force, but the words scattered like wind. The public still boiled, demanding resignations, demanding prosecutions. In her holding cell, Judge Leila Mahad remained silent. During the first interrogation, she asked for no lawyer, never inquired what charges she faced, as if she already knew everything was finished. She stared blankly at the wall hands, cuffed the same hands that once signed hundreds of court orders. The truth crashed down like 1,000 tons of stone. This was not just one corrupt judge, this was an entire system that had nurtured her. The days after the raids brought no calm, only paperwork, interrogations, frozen accounts, and truths too raw to soothe. Evidence rooms overflowed until even seasoned analysts had to pause and catch their breath at the sheer scale. From 6 kilograms of cocaine and one treacherous judge, the case had swollen into the largest corruption network in Minnesota history, with more than 240 kilograms of narcotics seized, enough to poison the entire state for months. Along with the drugs came cash gold bars, bank checks, and prepaid cards. Money counters roared for hours, and by the weekend the total stood at $154.9 million. It had been hidden in the most mundane places, ceiling vents inside water heaters, even in a child's plastic playhouse in a suburban basement. The drugs and money shocked, but they were only symptoms. The real blow was the thick ledger packed with the names, some with criminal records, but also county purchasing officers, clinic managers. A former deputy police chief, 2 accountants, and a church treasurer, faces no one would ever have suspected. When they were arrested, no one fought back. Some cried, some stayed silent. One whispered, "I thought everybody knew," then asked for a lawyer. Federal prosecutors rolled out indictments against 137 people in the network. Not all trafficked drugs. Many only forged paperwork, took dirty money, or rubber-stamped violations. There was no such thing as a small crime. Every act was a knife in the back of trust. The real pain was not in the courtroom. It seeped into everyday life. City offices sat half empty, with staff suspended. Emergency elections were called to replace council members who had already fled their seats. A small suburban bank shuttered the day its president was indicted, leaving customers panicked and unsure where to cash their checks. School board meetings erupted as parents raged that their children waited for buses near spots once used as secret drop points. Elderly residents stared at bank statements and realized the money meant for their home care nurses had been siphoned off to feed the cartel hearts, filling with suspicion and fury. In supermarket parking lots, people whispered, "I don't know who to trust anymore." An old man who had lived in Minneapolis 40 years left his porch light on all night for the first time. The state rushed to steady the ship, new task forces, hotlines, emergency hearings, but the unease still smoldered everywhere. At the press conference, a federal prosecutor declared that the investigation is only just beginning and many more arrests are coming. Behind her, long tables were lined with carefully labeled evidence bags stretching out of sight. Meanwhile, Judge Leila Mahad's courtroom remains untouched. No one dares disturb it. The polished wooden bench gleaming, the flags standing straight, the nameplate still in place, everything orderly and dignified as ever. But anyone who steps inside can no longer pretend ignorance. For years, justice was perverted right there, and the public is slowly waking to a bitter truth: the drugs did not sneak into the city on their own. They were waved through, protected, and permitted. They slipped through signatures, through approvals, through silent nods. Wherever trust was bent, a fracture appeared. It's easy to get lost in the spectacle of the piles of cash, the guns, the cocaine, the underground route maps, and the handcuffs snapping on officials' wrists. Those images are dramatic, unforgettable. But this case exposed something far more fragile and far more dangerous: the shattering of faith. Communities do not run on laws printed on paper. They run on the belief that the judge is honest, the cop protects you, the official spends tax dollars for you. When that belief crumbles, the damage spreads through the city like poison. No trucks needed, no drums required. Street crime makes families afraid, but crime inside the courthouse shatters faith in justice itself. A city can replace broken windows and fence off dark alleys, but it cannot easily weld trust back together once it is cracked. Yet amid the fear and fury, another truth quietly surfaced: the system is not dead. It has risen up and fought back. Agents woke before dawn, analysts chased every dollar, witnesses spoke, even when their voices shook. A retired nurse in St. Paul walked into the FBI office with files she had hidden for 3 years simply because something felt wrong. A young cop turned down a thick envelope and wrote the report instead of staying quiet. A bank teller printed the midnight transactions. Each of those small acts kept justice breathing. Tears in her eyes, she said she could no longer stand what she was seeing. That courage changed everything. Operation North Blade did not start with an agency order. It started with ordinary citizens who dared to look, dared to ask, dared to speak. Every quiet voice laid another brick in the wall against corruption. The raids, the indictments, the seizures were only the visible part. The real battle had been fought silently for years, long before the first door was kicked in. In the end, in her federal holding cell, Judge Leila Mahad sat motionless, offering no defense, no plea of innocence, only bowing her head as if finally feeling the crushing weight of the monster she had helped build. The greatest lesson from the Leila Mahad case is not the drugs or the money, but this power does not police itself. When no one dares ask questions, when a signature goes unexamined, when everybody does, it becomes the excuse the system itself will nurture a monster in its own gut. Justice only survives when millions of ordinary eyes are watching, when one regular citizen dares to say something's wrong, when one clerk refuses the envelope. We don't need heroes, we just need people who refuse to stay silent. That is the only shield we have left. Today, Leila Mahad sits in a federal holding cell. No lawyer, no defense, only the judicial robe now stripped away forever. 240 kilograms of drugs, $180 million, hundreds of shattered lives, and the broken trust of an entire state. All of it started with a single signature. This case is not just crime, it is a warning. When the guardian of justice becomes its seller, nothing remains safe. Do you think this could only happen in Minnesota? Or could it be happening right next door? Comment below, type system if this sends chills down your spine, or justice if you still believe hope remains. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next part. See you soon.